Ronald Osumba. He's the running mate of the Eagle Coalition, running, of course, alongside Peter Kenneth. And we saw him yesterday as they were presenting their papers ready to go for the national general election, March the 4th. Ronald, pleasure to have you with us.
Thank you.
All right. Busy time for you, is it?
Completely busy. We've now hit the road. Pretty much taking the message all across the country.
Okay.
We've been very busy over the weekend. We've been to Narok, Kajiado. We were in Eastlands over the weekend. Yesterday we were in Kawangware, Kangemi area. Today we are in Bomet. And yes, we're hitting the road.
Okay, all right. Very busy. Let's talk about how you came into the picture. Perhaps not many people associated you with politics until Peter Kenneth announced you as his running mate. Let's get to know you better, Ronald. Who is Ronald? And what is it that drives you to be the running mate of Peter Kenneth?
Ronald Osumba is a Kenyan with a passion for his country, who wants to see the best for this country, wants to ensure that we do the right thing, that there is leadership being provided for this country. We have dwelled too much on politics, and this, I think, is one of the strong decisions that Peter Kenneth has had to make. I actually call it his first presidential executive decision, to have somebody who's not a politician to help him with steering this country forward, because this country has been pulled behind too many times because of bad leadership, because we've dwelt too much on politics and forgotten that we actually should be providing strong and steady leadership. So that is what I bring to the table.
All right. You were at Starehe Boys at some point. Was it at the same time as Peter Kenneth? Was he a few years ahead of you, behind you? Did
Absolutely.
you ever interact in school at all?
Absolutely not. I'm much younger than Peter Kenneth. Actually, I think the only thing that brings us together are the core values that we share, that we got from Starehe, the heritage that we carry from that school. But we actually did not go to school at the same time.
How did you two meet? How did you two get to know about each other? Well,
we met in our corporate circles. We've done quite a bit of work together with Peter. We understand one another. I'm also his chairman at the Old Starehean Society. And we have had a long working relationship. One thing that probably a lot of people don't know is that I've also been involved in his campaign for the last 2 years. I was the chairman of one of his campaign teams. So we've had a long working relationship. We understand one another. We have a common vision. We share a common heritage. So we are very much aligned in the vision that we have for this country.
Okay, all right. If you've just joined us, we are speaking with Ronald Osumba, who is Peter Kenneth's running mate within the Eagle Coalition. It is official. The two of them will be on the ballot paper come March the 4th after presenting their papers to the IEBC yesterday. And we are interrogating the issues of the Eagle Coalition. Any questions you have, you can tweet them right now at Yvonne Okwara, at KTN Kenya. Send in your questions, your comments, your views via SMS. That's 8040. Do send us that message with your name and your location, questions you have for Ronald Osumba this morning. Let's talk about the issues, Ronald. We've seen...
That's what we like talking about.
That's what you like talking about. Okay. And we'll talk about that in a moment, whether Kenyans indeed, are keen on talking about the issues. What are the issues that you think define the Eagle campaign sort of format? What do we see from Eagle? What are the key things that you're focusing on for the election?
I think for a very long time, parties and candidates for the presidency have always come up with, the 10-point manifesto, 12-point manifesto that have largely not been kept, promises which have not been delivered to Kenyans. In the Eagle Alliance, one of the things that we have done is to decide to focus on few things that have an impact on the Kenyan society. So we have defined the Kenyan problems as two-pronged. The first is the high unemployment rate. That we have a lot of Kenyans today, 40% officially, and the number could be much higher, who are unemployed and do not have a source of livelihood. This number is spiraling out of control. If we don't stop it in the next 5 years, then we are looking at a very, very high unemployment rate in the next 5 years. But this is coupled with the second problem, which is food insecurity, that we are a hungry nation. Every year we are fighting drought, we are fighting famine. We are having relief efforts in different parts of the countries, in eastern, in coast, in northeastern. And these twin problems, if not resolved, then they spell doom for this country. We will be a hungry nation, largely youthful, somewhat educated, and this is a recipe for disaster. So these are the two things we want to tackle.
So let's talk about how you will tackle them.
Now, we have 5 pillars that we want to focus on. And I think the Eagle Coalition has gone around the country and largely discussed these 5 issues around, one, infrastructure. That we need to fix the infrastructure around the country. We need to open up places like Northeastern by building better roads, delivering energy, electricity. We need to look at security being the second key issue. That if we cannot secure this country, then we cannot have economic development. Without security, you do not have foreign investors coming in. Take our industrial area, for example. You have a lot of investors who are investing a lot of money and resources on putting up security around their premises. So you have watchmen, you have dogs, you have to put up high walls, you have to reinforce the high walls with electricity, with the electric lines, power lines. And these are some of the things that we want to address. The third thing we are looking at is health and healthcare. We want to be able to take healthcare closer to the people. So we are actually promising to build a referral hospital in every county.
Let's talk about that. 47 counties,
Absolutely.
Quite a number, and hospitals. As always, with all of the promises that we hear coming from candidates such as yourself, is where is the money going to come from?
The money is there. We have 2 big issues with our budget or with our financial system. The first is corruption. The cost of corruption is extremely steep in Kenya. We are losing a lot of money through corrupt practices. So we need to be tough on corruption. We need to stop it completely. But the second thing is the recurrent expenditure of our government is extremely steep. We are looking at anything between 150 billion to 180 billion. And if we can be able to save on these amounts, then we can be able to fund a lot of projects.
Ronald, corruption is deep-seated, perhaps in our culture, perhaps in our society. How are we able to fight that? We've just seen the National Taxpayers Association that released that report regarding the use of CDF funds. And in places like Huisero constituency, close to 60% of what was allocated has been, what we are saying, misappropriated. How do we deal with corruption in a way that stamps it out and then provides funds to do all of these things you're saying, like build hospitals in 47 counties?
There's once somebody said that corruption always fights back. Unfortunately, we have never prepared to fight corruption back because we know it will fight us back. Now, one of the things we need to do is we need to completely instill discipline. And instilling discipline means we must make corruption painful. It is as simple as that. We must be able to dispense with corruption cases within a couple of months, 2 to 3 months, instead of the 4, 5 years that it takes now. We need to completely make it unprofitable to get into corrupt practices. But the second thing we need to do, Yvonne, we need to also strengthen our criminal justice system. So the reforms that have started in the judiciary are welcome, and we hope that we will be able to continue to reinforce so that police officers will not be corruptible, because they are our first line of support when it comes to corrupt practices. They need to be able to apprehend any criminals who are engaging themselves in corrupt practices. The judiciary needs to be able to execute and prosecute very quickly, so that we can be able to finish with corruption cases within a very short span of time.
What is the role of the Ethics and Anti-Corruption Commission? We saw a lot of back and forth with just getting the commission in place in the first place in Parliament. Who should be there, who should not be there, who merits it, who doesn't, you know, gender balance and everything. And there is still a sense in this country that the Ethics and Anti-Corruption Commission does not have the teeth to bite. From the days when it was the EACC and we had Harun Mao at the helm, up till this moment, there is still the feeling that perhaps this could be a body that could be used. What are your thoughts on the anti-corruption?
Well, I wouldn't want to cast aspersions on any of the individuals who sit on the commission, but this is what I would want to say, that we have not seen the will from the leaders that be, whether it is the legislature or the executive, to support some of the institutions that we have put in place to deal with malpractices like corruption. It takes working together of all these government agencies, because the EACC cannot work alone. The EACC must be supported by the police, must be supported by the AG's office, must be supported by the judiciary. If we can be able to get these institutions to work in unison, then, and speak in one voice, then we can be able to see progress. So I think there has been some significant steps made. It's not enough, and what we're saying is we need to start being tough. We must not compromise. Now, of course, we must also appreciate that the just, concluded parliament or members of parliament have had their own interests. Okay, and what we're saying is, let us ensure that even members of parliament, members of the county assembly, leadership, right from the top to every level of government, needs to be a leadership that embraces integrity, that can be able to support some of these institutions.
Okay, let's talk about issues of integrity and perhaps, you know, in terms of vetting the candidates. We have seen just one candidate, Martha Karua, declare her wealth. Are you planning to do the same as the Eagle team?
I will, and I applaud Martha for taking that bold step. But it is not that other candidates have not. You probably know that it is a requirement of the law that every member of parliament must declare their wealth. And all these have been lodged with the Speaker of the Assembly. So the declarations are there for everybody to go and inspect.
That's for members of Parliament. You haven't been in Parliament. Will we see you declaring your wealth?
I mean, first, I am not required by law to do it. But secondly, I will do it if and when the time comes.
How about for Peter Kenneth?
Peter Kenneth has declared his wealth. It is lodged with the Speaker of the National Assembly.
Okay. There is no need for him to do it publicly, perhaps for the public to be able to have some faith in him? Do you think that would be a necessary move on your end?
I don't see why people should not have faith in Peter Kenneth. Because the purpose, we must remember that the purpose of wealth declaration is not necessarily to put it out in public and show everybody what you have. The purposes of wealth declaration is for the authorities to be able to, one, understand and track the public officers' growth of wealth. Should there be any reason that there needs to be further investigation, if any red flags appear, then that can be pursued through the proper channels.
Okay, but we will not see Peter Kenneth doing it in the same fashion as Martha Karua?
I will let Peter Kenneth make that decision, because remember, it is a personal wealth declaration.
Absolutely. All right. Okay. Getting politically correct with me here. All right. Let's talk about other issues. Yours is a youthful campaign.
Absolutely.
Issues to do with young people in this country. Now, they have been talked about time in memorial when we're saying, oh, the youth need to be addressed and employment needs to be done. How exactly are you going to be able to address issues facing the youth, who are the majority in this country?
And let me tell you, I think we have, for a very long time, prescribed solutions for youth employment. You know, we have seen people promise number of jobs per year, venturing into new avenues for youth employment. But the one thing that we keep forgetting is that the youth actually know what they want to do and how they need to get themselves into gainful employment. What we need to be doing is creating an enabling environment. We need to be ensuring that we have a secure country where everybody can be able to travel across counties and within counties, so that they can be able to pursue, whether it is their business interests or other interests. If we can be able to create a secure environment, if we can be...
Just explain that to us, enabling an environment that is conducive perhaps for employment, perhaps for security. What would that entail?
Now, what I'm just saying is that we need to reinforce our security initiatives across the country. We need to be able to have visibility of police, for example, on the streets of Nairobi. This by itself is a deterrent for any criminal activities. So we need to ensure that we have an increased presence of police. We need to ensure that we have a well-equipped police unit. Today, Yvonne, the police are actually struggling to respond to situations because they do not have enough vehicles. If they have vehicles, those vehicles do not have fuel. And all we are saying is, let us enable our police to do their job by ensuring that they are where they are supposed to be and they have the equipment that can be able to enable them do their job. If we create a secure environment, Yvonne, for example, you'll not have a problem walking in the streets in Gara, for example, pursuing business opportunities. Today, people fear going into places within the city and in some counties because they do not feel secure. So all we're saying is, let's create that environment. Let's bring down the cost of production, for example, because today you have very high costs of electricity, which shoots up the cost of production. People do not have, or industries do not have easy access to water, which takes up the cost of production. The roads that lead into, for example, our industrial areas, into agricultural areas, are dilapidated, and therefore the cost of production shoots up. If we create a conducive economic environment, then people can be able to pursue, their economic interests. But secondly, the youth are also people who have a lot of talent, and we need to harness this talent. If it is in sports, we need to be able to find a way that we can harness and market our sporting talent. We need to build sports academies across the country that allows young people to continuously develop their skills and use their skills as an income generating activity.
Okay. Let me ask you about some of the issues we've seen, or some of the projects that have been done for the youth in this country, and perhaps your take on why they haven't been as successful as they should be. If you were given the opportunity to rework them or tweak them, how better they would get. We have the Kazi kwa Vijana scheme, which was heavily criticized. We have the youth fund as well, that gave the youth access to funding to start their SMEs. Can you rate their performance, these two projects? If they've not done well as you think they should have, what would you do differently given the opportunity?
Well, Kazi kwa Vijana and the Youth Fund, I think, were one political tools that were being used to entice the youth of Kenya. You should remember that they were actually introduced just before elections, in the last election cycle. And I think it is extremely unfortunate that these two projects, very noble projects, with ill intentions though, were left to fail. Kazi kwa Vijana was not structured properly, and I think that is where the failures begin. And one of the things that we need to do if ever we have such a project is to ensure that it is well structured. One, it needs to take people's skills into account. Kazi kwa Vijana didn't do that. They defined specific jobs, for example, cutting grass along the roads, digging trenches, clearing manholes. And these are jobs that do not take skill sets, specific skill sets into account. So you had a lot of people coming in to do these jobs, not necessarily because they are skilled to do the job, but because they needed something in the pocket by the end of the day.
Some would have said, Ronald, when we talk about that, cutting grass and that sort of thing, that it sort of demeaned the youth. Should we be able to say, okay, youth are talented, they can be IT managers, they can cut the grass, and do you think there's still opportunity for Kenyans in, vocational training, for example?
Absolutely. I think skills training is something extremely important. We need to focus, we need to relook at our education content and see whether we are actually enabling young people to be prepared to get into the job market. We are largely training people to sit for exams, not necessarily equipping them for the job market. If we focus on that, then we begin to move forward in terms of just preparing people to go on. And this is why we are saying we want to also have county polytechnics across the country that will focus on vocational and skills training that prepares young people to, one, exploit their talents, but secondly, also to exploit the opportunities in the market that can then be able to give them reasonable livelihoods.
Okay. In discussing issues in this country, a lot of people say that there is no space for it in our political sphere. And I think you have talked about that as well in your campaign, that this is not the focus of the electorate. How do you propose to drive the discussion in one particular direction when we have a lot of political rhetoric, excitement, and whipping up of emotions?
I think, Yvonne, this is a misplaced idea, because Kenyans actually know the things that they want to hear. We have done our own internal polling, and one of the things that is key for Kenyans is unemployment. The unemployment rate is actually spiraling out of control. We need to stop that. The second most important thing for Kenyans is the issue of poverty. That today there are millions of Kenyans, tens of millions of Kenyans who are actually living below the poverty line. But the third thing, and because it is probably done nowadays with a lot of impunity and in the public face, is corruption. Because Kenyans understand that there is an implication when government funds are being wasted and going into people's pockets. It has an impact on their lives. So Kenyans actually understand that there are specific issues that are critical to them. And we are having these conversations across the country. And everywhere we go, whether you are in Narok, whether you are in Kwale, whether you are in Marakwet, they will actually tell you that we have concerns. And these are the things that concern us. This is precisely why every election cycle we send 80% of sitting MPs home, because they have not addressed the issues that are close. So
you believe Kenyans are addressing issues?
Absolutely. But I also believe that our politicians are, shrouding bad leadership with the issue of tribalism, because they do not want to address these issues. They do not have the capacity probably to address these issues, and therefore they want to always balkanize us, so that we are always talking about how many millions this tribe has and how many millions this the tribe has, and completely shifting our focus from the things that matter to us to the things that matter to them.
Okay, all right. Some say that Kenya is not ready for your type of politics and that your time is coming in 2017. What do you say to that?
The time is now. 2017 is too far. 5 more years of the same old bad practices and the same old bad leadership is 5 years too many. We must stop the digging now. We must stop the spiraling unemployment rate. We must stop people dying from hunger. We must stop people dying from common disease. We are continuously producing, more and more millions of children through our free primary education with bad quality education, and we must stop the bleeding at some point.
All right. Speaking to Ronald Osumba, who is Peter Kenneth's running mate within the Eagle Coalition, we want to take a short break right now. Keep your questions coming in on Twitter and on our SMS line 8040. We'll be right back. Issues we've been discussing a host of issues right here on the show. So Ronald, while we were taking the break, we were talking about the fact that you are new to the public eye, and we have a question here, a text question here saying, let me find that. Well done. You're on the right path. The Eagle Coalition is the cream that has risen to the top. That's Jambi from Gong Road. And we also have this one that's asking what your public life is like. This is perhaps a question you will continue to get. For most of the other candidates, they've been around. They've been, members of parliament or ministers for that matter. Perhaps you can just shed light on what you've been able to do in the private sector, and what about that makes you feel that you are ready to be the next deputy president?
I mean, a very good question, and I get it quite a bit. But we need to look at it from two perspectives as well. One, that you don't have to have been in public life for you to be able to provide leadership in government. But secondly also, public life does not necessarily mean having to work in government. Because I have interacted quite a bit. I have worked with a lot of non-governmental organizations in development projects across the country. I have set up some. I have worked with different groupings and formations across the country. I am the chairman of the Youth and Employment Sustainability Kenya, which is a national organization that works with a lot of young people across the country to put together youth employment structures for livelihoods, of course. But secondly, like you rightfully said, I have honed my leadership skills in the private sector. And in my last station at Safaricom, I was actually head of public sector. So I have worked extensively with government departments and ministries, and even with the office of the president, to basically review government structures, provide solutions that make government agencies and departments efficient, and can be able to, and flow of communication and information. So we have dabbled in this, what people call public life. I have been around politicians for a bit of my adult life. So it's not something that will be extremely very new to me.
But do you feel like you have to continue to reintroduce yourself to the electorate?
Yes, which is also unfortunate, because I think the electorate is used to the usual politician. What we are proposing as the Eagle Alliance is that probably it is time we looked at leadership rather than politics, that we look for leaders rather than politicians. And this is what we are offering. I was having this conversation yesterday, and somebody was saying Kenyans for a long time have been agitating and saying we need fresh leadership. And every election cycle, we actually say we need fresh leadership. But when fresh leadership comes up, we say, you're not politically experienced. And we were having this conversation, and we were saying we get this sense that Kenyans actually fear pulling out of this relationship with bad leadership, or have the fear of the unknown. And so it is something that I think I want to encourage Kenyans, that doing the same thing every 5 years has not helped us, will not help us. It is probably time we tried a new thing.
All right, and that new thing being you. Let's talk about perceptions and opinion polling for a minute. I know for a fact that you do not agree with it. Tell us why.
We have made our argument, and I think we begin to belabor the point by saying it over and over again. But the point is this: we have concerns that the polling is being used for purposes of shaping the conversation. That we are using the opinion polls to push a certain agenda, an agenda that is not known to us. But this is unfortunate. We need to allow Kenyans to make up their minds. We need to allow Kenyans to pick the leaders that they believe will address their issues. We need to allow Kenyans to go to the polls on March 4th and make the decisions for themselves. If you look at the demographic profile that a lot of these opinion polls are using, it is extremely skewed to meet a certain specific endgame or a certain specific result. But that said, I think we in the Eagle Coalition believe that the real opinion polling masters, or the real pollsters, are the Kenyans themselves, and that they will decide who is the best choice for Kenya come March 4th.
Ronald, what happens if you don't win in March 4th? What role do you see yourselves, you and Peter Kenneth, playing in leadership in this country if you don't win?
We will continue to play an active role in the unlikely event that we do not win. But this is what I want to say, that we have a Kenya after March 4th, that we have a country that we must keep together, that we must remain as one people, and that as leaders, we will continue to provide Kenyans with that leadership that they require. We will continue to steer conversations towards values. I will tell you one thing that Peter and I have in common, and it is very strange that we were speaking about it at the same time in different forums, but we said exactly the same thing, that we are desperate to do this job. We are desperate to change the fortunes of our country, but we are not desperate for the job. That is something that Kenyans must decide upon. Kenyans must be desperate enough to have the right leadership. They must be hungry enough to fix their issues.
Okay, all right. You heard it from Ronald Osumba himself. He is Peter Kenneth's running mate on the Eagle Coalition ticket, now officially on the ballot paper come March the 4th. It's going up to 8 o'clock right now on KTN Sunrise Live. Thank you so much for engaging with us this far. Coming up next, we're talking about dress codes at the workplace, and it's all about LSK's latest revised dress code, talking about how lawyers should dress. And we'll be talking about how lawyers should dress and indeed how all of us should dress at the workplace. Derek Banga joins us next. We take a short break now. We'll be right back. The LSK